Welcome, friends, to a captivating story filled with unexpected turns, buried family secrets, and the incredible power of compassion. Sit back and enjoy. Leonard Blackwell, CEO of Blackwell Industries and one of New York's most sought-after bachelors, stood before the full-length mirror in his penthouse. The reflection staring back was barely recognizable. Gone was the polished executive who had graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, running his fingers through his hair, now dyed a sickly shade of green. The food coloring had left it disheveled and unkempt. His usually clean-shaven face was hidden behind a scruffy, fake beard, and oversized, ill-fitting glasses sat awkwardly on his nose. The designer suit had been swapped for tattered pants that barely stayed on his frame, and a worn-out jacket with one sleeve hanging by a thread. He held a canvas bag filled with empty bottles to complete the look. As Leonard stepped out onto the busy streets of Manhattan, he couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. A billionaire, shuffling down the street like a common vagrant, all because of his son's wild plan. "The things we do for family," he sighed, recalling the conversation that led him here. People on the sidewalk kept their distance. Some avoided eye contact, while others cast him looks of disgust or pity. It was a stark contrast to the usual deference and admiration he received. "Spare some change," he half-heartedly called to a passerby, wincing at the unfamiliar words. The man walked by without a glance, leaving Leonard feeling both ridiculous and strangely invisible. As he neared the business district, Leonard's eyes were drawn to the towering skyscrapers, home to some of the world's most powerful corporations, his own included. He watched as professionals in sharp suits hurried into the buildings, living a life that had been his just a day ago. "Focus, Lynn," he muttered under his breath. "You're doing this for Daniel." With a deep breath, Leonard gathered his resolve and shuffled toward the parking lot of a nearby office building. Whether he agreed with it or not, it was time to set his son's plan into motion. The late afternoon sun blazed overhead as Leonard lingered by the entrance to the business center's parking lot, uncertain about what he was supposed to do next. For over an hour, he had been watching people come and go, trying to muster up the nerve to approach someone. "This is absurd," he thought, wiping the sweat from his brow. "I'm Leonard Blackwell, for crying out loud. I don't beg, I close billion-dollar deals." Just as he was ready to throw in the towel and abandon the whole plan, a young woman caught his eye. She had a natural girl-next-door beauty, with honey blonde hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Her dress, though nice, was clearly off the rack, nothing like the high-end designer outfits worn by those around her. As she neared her car, a modest sedan that had clearly seen better days, Leonard decided it was now or never. "Excuse me, miss," he called, his voice deliberately roughened. "Could you spare some food for a hungry old man?" The woman turned, startled. For a moment, Leonard braced himself for rejection, expecting her to hurry past like so many others. But her expression quickly softened. "Oh, you poor thing," she said, reaching into her bag. "I have a pizza here. I was going to eat it for dinner, but you need it more than I do." Leonard was stunned by her kindness. As he reached for the pizza, the woman, Elizabeth, he would later learn, tilted her head as if thinking something over. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I might have something better than just a meal. How would you feel about a job?" Leonard nearly choked on his first bite of pizza. "A job?" he repeated, incredulous. Elizabeth nodded eagerly. "I run an animal shelter on the edge of town, and we're always short on help. The pay isn't great, but it comes with meals and a place to stay." Leonard was momentarily speechless. This was not part of the plan. He was supposed to gather dirt on her supposed infidelity, not land a job offer. That's very generous of you," he stammered. "Wonderful," Elizabeth said, beaming. "Hop in, and I'll drive you there. We can work out the details on the way." Before Leonard knew it, he was sitting in the passenger seat of her car, heading toward the industrial district. As they drove, He couldn't help but be struck by her warmth and generosity. Maybe Daniel had to be wrong about her, Leonard thought, but there was only one way to know for sure. The night before, Leonard's quiet evening had been shattered by the sudden arrival of his son Daniel. The young man had stormed into the mansion, his usually neat appearance in disarray, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and hurt. "Dad, I need your help," Daniel had said, skipping any pleasantries. "I think Elizabeth is cheating on me." Leonard had nearly dropped his scotch. "Elizabeth? Your Elizabeth? That doesn't sound like her at all." Daniel had paced back and forth like a trapped animal. "I know it doesn't, but she's been acting weird lately, always rushing off, being secretive with her phone. And I found this huge bank transfer on her account. Where's that money going, Dad?" Leonard had tried to stay calm. "Daniel, she runs her own business. Big transfers aren't out of the ordinary." But Daniel wouldn't listen. He had unzipped a duffel bag and spilled its contents onto the Persian rug. "That's why I came up with this plan. You're going undercover, Dad, as a homeless man." Leonard had stared at the ragged clothes and makeup in disbelief. "You can't be serious." "I am," Daniel had insisted. "Elizabeth always helps the homeless. If anyone can get her to talk, it's you in disguise. Please, Dad, I need to know the truth before I marry her." Now, sitting in the passenger seat of Elizabeth's car, heading to her mysterious animal shelter, Leonard felt conflicted. Was he betraying this kind woman's trust, or protecting his son from potential heartbreak? As they approached a rundown warehouse in the industrial district, Leonard took a deep breath, steeling himself. No matter what, he had to uncover the truth. The drive had been eye-opening. Elizabeth had animatedly talked about her passion for helping animals, her face glowing with enthusiasm. "I've always loved animals," she'd said. "When I saw so many strays on the streets, I knew I had to do something. It started small, but now..." She trailed off as they arrived at the large, slightly dilapidated building. "Well, now it's this." As Elizabeth led Leonard through the shelter, he was astonished by the scale of her operation. Rows of kennels housed dogs of every shape and size. There was even a separate area for cats, and another room with cages for rabbits, guinea pigs, and a few birds. "This is incredible," Leonard had said, genuinely impressed. "How do you manage all this?" Elizabeth had sighed. "It's tough. We're always short on money and staff. That's why I'm so grateful you're here to help." Leonard had felt a pang of guilt. He was there to investigate her, yet here she was, doing all she could to help animals in need. But then, as they reached the dog kennels, Leonard's world tilted. There, in one of the pens, was a face he knew all too well, a furry, familiar muzzle. "Daisy?" he gasped, forgetting his homeless persona for a moment. The white dog with the bright pink tail, a grooming choice his mother had insisted on, perked up at the sound of her name. She bounded to the door, tail wagging in recognition. Elizabeth had looked at him, puzzled. "You know this dog." Leonard had realized his mistake too late. In his shock at seeing Daisy, a dog he had believed to have died in the mudslide that claimed his mother 6 months ago, he'd let his guard down. Daniel stared at his father, confusion etched on his face. "Dad, what are you talking about?" But Leonard was already stepping forward, his heart racing. With a trembling hand, he pushed open the makeshift door. Inside the shack, darkness enveloped them, illuminated only by the fading daylight seeping through cracks in the walls. As their eyes adjusted, they spotted a figure lying on a threadbare mattress in the corner. "Oh my God," Elizabeth exclaimed, her hand flying to her mouth. There, on the mattress, lay an elderly woman. Her silver hair was matted and unkempt, and her clothes were little more than rags. Yet, despite her disheveled appearance, her identity was unmistakable. "Grandma Anna," Daniel whispered, disbelief washing over him. The woman stirred at the sound of their voices, her eyes fluttering open. For a brief moment, she stared at them in confusion. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, recognition flooded her face. "Leonard? Daniel?" She croaked, her voice weak but unmistakable. "Is it really you?" As Daisy bounded over to the bed, tail wagging furiously, the gravity of the situation crashed down on them. Anna Blackwell, Daniel's grandmother and Leonard's mother, was alive. The woman they had mourned for 6 months, presumed lost in a devastating mudslide, was here before them, living in squalor by the river. Questions swirled in Leonard's mind. How had she survived? Why hadn't she come home? And who had been caring for her all this time? Just then, the sound of footsteps outside the shack drew their attention. A man stood in the doorway, shock and fear etched on his face as he took in the scene. "Greg," Anna said warmly, her voice tinged with affection. "Greg, look who's here. It's my family." The newcomer, Greg, appeared to deflate, his shoulders slumping in resignation. "I guess," he said softly, "it's time for me to explain everything." As the group settled in to hear Greg's story, Leonard felt an overwhelming sense that they were on the verge of uncovering a mystery that would change all their lives forever. The cramped interior of the shack felt even smaller with all of them inside, yet no one seemed eager to leave. Greg, a man likely in his late 60s with weathered features and kind eyes, sat on an overturned crate, his gaze fixed on Anna. "I suppose I should start at the beginning," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Anna and we have a history." Anna reached out, taking Greg's hand and smiling encouragingly. "It's okay, dear. They should know the truth." Greg nodded, inhaled deeply, and began his tale. "Anna and I met in college almost 50 years ago. We fell in love, but her mother, well, she didn't approve of me. She said I wasn't good enough for her daughter." Leonard and Daniel exchanged bewildered glances. They had never heard this part of Anna's past before. Greg continued, "We were forced apart. Anna married someone else and started a family. I tried to move on, but I never really did." He paused, his eyes misty with memories. Life has a strange way of offering second chances, though. 6 months ago, I was living down by the river, having lost my job and then my house. I thought things couldn't get any worse. His voice grew urgent as he recounted the night of the mudslide. "I heard the rumble, saw the hillside collapsing, and there in the middle of it all was Anna. Without a second thought, I just ran and pulled her out." Anna squeezed his hand. "My hero," she whispered. "But when she came to," Greg continued, his voice heavy with guilt, "she didn't remember anything, not her name, not her family, nothing." Understanding flickered in Leonard's eyes. "So you told her?" Greg nodded, shame evident on his face. "I told her we were married, that we lived here together. I know it was wrong, but after all these years, having her back, I couldn't bear the thought of losing her again." Silence fell in the shack as everyone absorbed this revelation. Elizabeth, who had been quietly listening, was the first to break the stillness. "But why didn't you seek help? Surely you must have seen she needed medical attention." Greg's face crumpled. "I was sick myself," he admitted. "Cancer drained all my savings on treatments that didn't work. I thought I had only a few months left. I wanted to spend that time with Anna, even if she didn't truly remember me." Anna turned to her family, her eyes bright and alert. "But I do remember now," she said. "Seeing all of you has brought everything back, and Greg," she glanced back at him, her gaze softening, "I remember you too, not just from these past months, but from before. You were my first love." The weight of this revelation hung in the air, heavy with decades of unspoken emotions. Leonard cleared his throat, struggling to process everything he had just heard. "Mom," he said gently, "we thought you were dead. We mourned you. Why didn't you try to reach out to us once you regained your memory?" Anna's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Leonard, by the time I began to remember, Greg was so ill. I couldn't bear to leave him, and I was ashamed. Ashamed that I had forgotten you all. Ashamed that I had lived this life while you grieved. It felt easier to stay hidden." Daniel, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "Grandma, none of that matters now." We're so grateful you're alive." He turned to Greg, his face a blend of gratitude and concern. "And you, sir, you saved my grandmother's life. We can never repay you for that." Greg shook his head, a slight cough escaping him. "I don't deserve your gratitude. I lied to Anna. I kept her from her family out of love." Elizabeth spoke up, surprising everyone. She had been quietly observing from the corner, but now she stepped forward, her eyes filled with compassion. "You acted out of love. It may not have been the right thing to do, but it's understandable." Leonard regarded his future daughter-in-law with newfound admiration. Here was the woman his son had once suspected of infidelity, demonstrating more empathy and forgiveness than any of them. Just then, Anna began to cough violently, her frail frame shaking with the effort. Greg rushed to her side, momentarily forgetting his own discomfort as concern for her took over. "We need to get both of you to a hospital," Leonard declared firmly, slipping back into his role as the family's problem solver. "No arguments. You both need medical care, and we have a lot of catching up to do. We'll do it somewhere safe and comfortable." As they assisted Anna and Greg out of the shack, with Daisy happily trotting beside them, Leonard couldn't help but reflect on the extraordinary twists of fate that had brought them all together. His absurd disguise as a homeless man, Daniel's misplaced suspicions, Elizabeth's compassionate nature, every element had culminated in this moment of reunion and redemption. The following weeks were a flurry of activity. Anna and Greg were admitted to the city's best private hospital, thanks to Leonard's significant influence and resources. While Anna received treatment for severe pneumonia and malnutrition, and Greg for his advanced cancer, the Blackwell family began the long process of healing their emotional wounds. Daniel and Elizabeth spent hours by Anna's bedside, bringing her up to speed on everything she had missed. They told her about their engagement, talked about Elizabeth's animal shelter, and clarified the misunderstanding that had led to Leonard's undercover mission. "I still can't believe you thought I was cheating on you," Elizabeth said to Daniel one afternoon, shaking her head in disbelief. "And with a secret lover supposedly stashed away in an animal shelter, no less." Daniel looked sheepish. I know, it was a dumb mistake. Can you ever forgive me?" Elizabeth's expression softened. "I already have, but you owe your dad a big apology for making him dress up like a homeless person." From his chair across the room, Leonard chuckled. "Oh, I don't know. It was actually quite enlightening. It gave me a new perspective on life, and it truly had. The experience of being treated as invisible, along with the mix of cruelty and unexpected kindness, profoundly impacted Leonard. He began reevaluating his priorities in both business and his personal life. A significant outcome of this introspection was a renewed commitment to philanthropy. Leonard immersed himself in supporting Elizabeth's animal shelter, leveraging his business skills and connections to secure funding and expand its operations. "You know," he said to Elizabeth one day as they toured the newly renovated facility, "I owe you an apology too. I went along with Daniel's plan, even though I knew it was wrong. I should have trusted my instincts about you." Elizabeth smiled, reaching down to scratch behind Daisy's ears as the dog happily trotted beside them. "Water under the bridge, Leonard. Besides, if you hadn't come here in disguise, who knows how long it would have taken to find Anna and Greg." The mention of Greg brought a somber mood over them. Despite the medical team's best efforts, his cancer had advanced too far, and the doctors estimated he had only a few months to live. However, those months turned out to be filled with more joy than Greg had ever imagined possible. Once Anna regained her strength, she rarely left his side, and they filled their days with laughter, conversation, and making up for lost time. "You know," Anna said to Leonard one evening as they watched Greg peacefully dozing in his hospital bed, "I loved your father dearly, but Greg was the love of my life. I just didn't have the courage to fight for him when I was younger." Leonard squeezed his mother-in-law's hand, and Anna's eyes sparkled with determination. Now I won't let him go. Not ever again." As summer faded into autumn, the Blackwell family found themselves planning not one wedding, but two, as Daniel and Elizabeth's nuptials had been postponed in light of recent events. Anna had just announced her intention to marry Greg. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" Leonard asked gently. "You know Greg doesn't have much time left." Without hesitation, Anna replied, "I've never been more certain of anything in my life, Leonard. I lost 50 years with Greg because I was too afraid to follow my heart. I won't waste another day." On a crisp October afternoon, the grand ballroom of the Blackwell mansion became the setting for a double wedding. Elizabeth radiated in a simple yet elegant gown, flanked by a mix of childhood friends and volunteers from the animal shelter as her bridesmaids. Daniel beamed with pride and love as he watched her walk down the aisle, but it was the second couple that drew tears from everyone present. Greg, frail but resolute, stood tall as he awaited his bride, while Anna, her silver hair adorned with a wreath of autumn flowers, glowed with happiness as she took her place beside him. When the minister pronounced both couples husband and wife, a joyful bark echoed through the ballroom. Daisy, resplendent in a floral collar, had broken free from her handler and bounded down the aisle, her pink tail wagging furiously. Laughter filled the air as the little dog jumped up to plant slobbery kisses on both brides, creating a moment of pure, unbridled joy, a perfect representation of the love and second chances that had brought them all together. During the reception that followed, Leonard found himself standing alone for a moment, taking in the joyful scene. Daniel and Elizabeth danced, completely absorbed in each other's eyes, while Anna and Greg sat hand in hand, surrounded by well-wishers. Daisy wove through the crowd, accepting pets and treats from delighted guests. Quite a gathering, isn't it? Leonard turned to see a striking woman in her early 40s standing beside him. She had warm brown eyes and a smile that immediately put him at ease. "Sarah Jenkins," she introduced herself, extending her hand. "I'm the veterinarian who's been working with Elizabeth at the shelter. You must be the famous Leonard Blackwell." As they shook hands, Leonard felt an unexpected spark of connection. "I know about that," he chuckled. "Though I did have a brief stint as a homeless man recently. Didn't quite make the headlines, though." Sarah's eyebrows shot up in amusement. Now that sounds like a story worth sharing. As Leonard began recounting his misadventures, he realized that his own second chance at love might be closer than he had imagined. A year later, the Blackwell mansion was once again filled with laughter and joy. This time, they were celebrating the grand opening of the Anna and Greg Blackwell Animal Sanctuary, a cutting-edge facility that blended Elizabeth's passion for animal welfare with Leonard's business savvy. Greg, defying all medical predictions, had reached his and Anna's first wedding anniversary. Although still frail, the happiness of the past year had given him a new lease on life. He sat in a wheelchair beside Anna, beaming with pride as Elizabeth cut the ribbon to officially open the sanctuary. Daniel, now a passionate advocate for animal rescue, stood by Elizabeth's side. Their own big news, Elizabeth's pregnancy, had been announced just a week earlier, adding even more joy to the family. Throughout the ceremony, Leonard found himself stealing glances at Sarah. Their friendship had blossomed over the year into something deeper, filling him with a renewed sense of purpose and happiness. As the guests mingled, touring the new facilities and cooing over the animals, Daisy trotted up to Leonard. Her pink tail, now faded yet still distinctive, wagged excitedly as she dropped a tennis ball at his feet. Leonard crouched down to pet her, marveling at the series of events this little dog had set in motion. From a chance meeting in an animal shelter to a reunited family, from mended hearts to newfound love, all thanks to a scruffy white dog with a pink tail. "You know," Sarah said, coming to stand beside him, "I think Daisy deserves a special title. How about Chief Matchmaker of the Sanctuary?" Leonard laughed, standing up and wrapping an arm around Sarah's waist. "That's perfect. After all, she brought us all together in her own unique way. As they walked to join the rest of the family, Leonard reflected on the journey that had led them to this moment. From a misguided masquerade to a beautiful reality, from suspicion to trust, from loss to love, it had been a year of transformation for all. As he looked around at the joyful faces of his family, the contentment in Anna and Greg's eyes, the passion and purpose radiating from Daniel and Elizabeth, and the warmth of Sarah beside him, Leonard knew one thing for certain. Sometimes the greatest treasures in life come disguised in the most unexpected packages.